Happy Resurrection Sunday. So, some thoughts from my quiet time with the Lord, reading through the account of the resurrection and the crucifixion, but also the denying of Jesus from Peter. And the phrase that stood out to me in a way that's never stood out to me before was the phrase at a distance. So, when you get to Matthew 27, verse 58, Peter followed him at a distance to the high priest's courtyard, and he went in and sat with the servants to see the end. So he's physically distancing himself already. And then you go down further, Peter's sitting outside of the courtyard. So this is where the temple is. This is where all of this stuff is happening. He's distancing himself physically before he ends up verbally distancing himself by saying that he denies Christ 3 times. And what also stood out to me first was the servant girls. So you have one servant girl who said, "You were with Jesus of Galilee." And then you have another servant girl say to him that they were there with him. This fellow was also with Jesus of Nazareth. And then you have again those who stood later around him saying to Peter, "Surely you are one of them. Your speech betrays you," saying that you sound like them. And like, shouldn't that be the case when we spend so much time with Jesus, that we sound like Jesus, that we act like Jesus, that we talk like Jesus, that we smell like Jesus, that the aroma of the holy is on us? But distance from Jesus makes me feel like, it makes us feel like we can't go back. And the beautiful story here with Judas and Peter is Judas chose complete and total distance from Jesus. He chose death. He chose hanging himself. He chose betraying the man who he loved and the man who loved him, and all these things. He chose distance forever from him. And then you go to Peter, and Peter chooses distance for just some time, because then we know his story is that the resurrection and the restoration in Peter. So the resurrection of Jesus, which causes the restoration of Peter, which causes Peter to have the chance at everlasting life. And the fact that he is charged then with the beauty of, in the Gospels, we zoom through, get to John. I had it bookmarked and then it went away. So Jesus reaching out to Peter, he restores him. When you get to John 21, the order of the shepherd's day, which I found fascinating, is that the way that Jesus tells him to take care of the lambs, to tend the sheep, to feed the sheep, is like the order of which the shepherd would have been acting. And so those two beautiful words, "follow me," he utters again to him, which are the same words that he says when he first instates him into becoming a fisher of men. He wipes out Peter's failure. Jesus' death, resurrection, and ascension wipes out all of our failures as long as we believe in him. He commissions Peter into the same path that Jesus then ultimately took. He says here, "Most assuredly, I say to you, when you were younger, you girded yourself and walked where you wished. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will gird you and carry you where you do not wish." He spoke this, signifying of the death that would glorify God. And when he had spoken this, he said to him, "Follow me." So he already saw, because he's Jesus, he already saw the death of Peter when he was instating him first. And then you get to his reinstating him and restoring him and commissioning him into the same path. So before, when James and John were asking to sit at the right and the left, and they wanted to drink the same cup of suffering, and they wanted to understand what it meant to do that, they didn't understand because they didn't have that insight. But now that Peter knows that he is the rock of which the church's like foundation is built on, that Christ is the cornerstone, but the rock is Peter. And then you fast forward to Pentecost Sunday, and how they're waiting and they're waiting and they're waiting, and the Holy Spirit shows up like tongues of fire above their heads, and they are able to say confidently, Peter is able to say confidently to the crowd, he says, we are not drunk. We're not drunk because it is this time of day. The fact that he thinks that they're all drunk because they're all talking in all these different languages and they're knowing all of these things, like, and they're understanding each other. And then Peter takes the moments to explain, it came to pass in the last days, says God, I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. So every tribe, nation, tongue, and people will know what the Holy Spirit is. We just have to wait for that day. And the best way for us to continue that mission is by telling people about Jesus. So this Resurrection Sunday, take some time to tell people about Jesus. Tell your neighbors about Jesus. Tell your drivers about Jesus if you're in an Uber or anything like that. Tell your pilot about Jesus if you're on this out among the clouds. Tell someone about Jesus. For he is risen. He is risen indeed.